I'm Peter Lindstrom. I'll call the meeting of the Environment Committee to order. And the first thing on our agenda is the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Next item is the approval of the minutes from May 28th, 2019.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
has been made to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
I heard a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. That takes us to the fourth item on our agenda, which is a overview of the review process, as we have a whole host of comprehensive plans coming before this committee in the weeks and months ahead. We're going to be talking a little bit about what that is going to be looking like. So welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Kyle Colvin, who is the manager of engineering, planning, and programs, and I would like to talk to you about the opportunity or options available to you to complete the review process of the comprehensive plans, either reviewing them in full or placing some of them on the consent agenda if they are considered to be more routine. So we have a quick presentation available just to share that with you.
Right. Thank you. I'll be starting off a little bit with the history of the consent and non-consent on the wastewater plan elements of comp plans. As you know, the council will, through this planning process, will take action on 188 plans in the 7-county area. That includes 181 city and township plans, and then the 7 counties that are in the region. Included in that is 128 local community plans that the Environment Committee will be taking action on. Those communities are communities that are wholly or at least in part served by the regional disposal system, the council system. They are communities that may not currently be served by the regional system, but plan to be served within the next 20-year planning horizon. So those that are proposing to connect for the first time. And there are 2 communities out there that we're having discussions on whose plan might actually represent connection to the system for the first time. And then, of course, the third category would be those communities that own and operate and provide their own wastewater treatment services within the community. The council also reviews those plans to verify that they are planning the adequate system capacity to provide for their growth in the next 20 years, and that assures that the council can identify those communities that might be requesting the council to take over their treatment facilities in the 20-year planning period. To date, we have completed 4 community comp plan approvals, and on today's agenda are 5 additional ones. So that after today, that will be a total of 9. 9 out of the 128, so we still have about 120 comp plans to go, and that's one of the reasons why we're here today to talk about using some of these through a consent action item.
So, Mr. Chair, the reason that we're asking you to consider approving some of the plans on consent on a consent process is that obviously for efficiency of time, but also to give you folks time to deal with other agenda matters that you'll find coming up on your agenda, as we have a number of information items that we wanted to share with you because you're new to the council, and then also we have a number of construction projects coming forward, and we also have other contracts that are required in order for us to keep the wastewater system operating. So we took the liberty this evening to work with Chair Lindstrom and organize the agenda as a consent versus on items that were considered non-consent. But after this presentation, if you wanted to make some adjustments, we certainly would be happy to do that. So first of all, plan items that would be considered consent or plans that would be considered consent would be those that satisfy the content requirements, conform and are consistent with the regional wastewater policy, and is compatible with the adjacent communities and other jurisdictions' policies, reflects the council's assigned forecast for population growth. There's no changes in the 2040 service area or the metropolitan urban service area. The growth and wastewater flow accommodated without need for system capacity improvements or system extensions. And then addresses II mitigation plans or inflow and infiltration mitigation plan requirements, and is absent of any significant advisory comments. So those are the ones that would be considered routine, and we would ask that you can approve those on a consent agenda. Those that would be considered non-consent would be those that represent potential negative impact on regional wastewater system, such as insufficient existing system capacity. Those that represent a departure from regional wastewater system plan, for example, underutilization of capacity investment. Those that represent new connections to regional wastewater system by 2040 are those that require follow-up by community to be considered to be non-typical. So any of those items could shift this into a non-consent agenda. So, and then we wanted to give you a little bit of a history on this. So in 1998, we actually had a process where plans that were non-controversial were considered on the consent agenda, and those that had policy or system conformance issues were considered as a non-consent item. Then in 2008, the direction of the regional administrator was that all non-consent, all plans had to be considered as non-consent as directed by the process policy. So that was the direction of the regional administrator. And then for 2018, we're asking again for the reasons that I identified before. For efficiency and to give you folks time to consider other matters, we're requesting that you consider to returning to the 1998 process, which would be the consent and the non-consent items. Any questions?
Any questions, yeah? Please.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair. I just had one, and maybe you can, maybe it's one of those secrets, but what communities are looking at possibly going online? Can you share that with it, or is that you?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Council Member. The Credit River Township has currently submitted a plan that reflects connection to some existing neighborhoods that are on septic systems that are failing. These are lots that are 1 acre in size or smaller, and so they're running into system compliance issues. So they've approached the council to connect to the regional system through the city of Savage. And with that, I think we're still in negotiations with the township, but it appears that the plan will be for the first 10-year periods of the 20-year planning horizon for them to connect these existing homes that are on septic systems. And then in this latter part of the 20-year planning period would be bringing in additional vacant land for new development.
Good. Just one follow-up
Please.
question too. So when you hook up a new city, do you end up having like ribbon cuttings or groundbreakings for these type of things, or not? Just gonna add them on. Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Mr. Chair and Council Member, we do actually, in a sense, kind of roll out the red carpet a year prior to the actual connection to the system. We will formulate a new customer forum meeting where usually Janine and then myself and someone from SAC and our industrial waste division will go out and kind of explain the processes of and expectations of becoming a community served by the regional system, and then also all the other services that we also provide. For instance, as I mentioned, SAC, doing SAC determinations for the community, or providing oversight for industrial waste discharges in the system. So there is, in a sense, there's kind of an orientation of that.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
No jets or fireworks going on?
No flyer,
or
no.
anything like that? Council member.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested to know how often the wastewater component of the comprehensive plans are controversial on a local level, and didn't really see in the breakdown there if there's known opposition to the wastewater component on a local level, if that would serve as a threshold for being not non-consent.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Fredson, very rarely do we get a plan come in that would not satisfy the consent criteria that we mentioned. In fact, the one item today that I'll cover, we specifically put in as non-consent. I would advocate that this would probably fall under the consent category. Um, I was here through the 2008 process, and I can only think of 2 or 3 communities that would not have, if we had had the process in '08, would not have met the criteria for the consent. And in one of those cases, there was a system departure. There was regional investment made in the regional wastewater system, and the community as plan reflected basically turning away of utilizing that regional investment. So that is what we call a system departure. So that obviously would not have been a consent item. And obviously, if there is opposition to a plan, that would also force it into a non-consent item agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
I guess maybe just
Yeah.
to follow up to that, at least that wasn't clear to me on the slide, so I don't know if you could add a bullet that says if there's no opposition to the,
Yes.
Sure, absolutely.
that would be, I think, helpful.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Very good. Well, that sounds like a good course of action, and we will proceed with that recommendation with the suggested change.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good, thank you. Okay, and that takes us to the general manager's report. Do we have a report from Sam today?
None today.
All right. Very good. That takes us through or to the consent agenda where we have 4 of the plans that we just talked about. So, Kyle, please. Or did you have a?
Yeah, I just had a point of information.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm thinking, I know they're on consent agenda, but do we still approve the consent agenda, or just to make sure we take a vote on that of the ones that go? with that?
Yes, we still need to take a vote on the consent agenda.
Okay, all right, thank
Yep.
you.
Yeah, should we take the vote now? Is that the right course of action? Does anybody wish to remove any of these plans from the consent agenda? I'm seeing no. Okay. So we'll need a motion to approve the consent
I'd
agenda.
like to make a motion to approve the items that are on the consent agenda, the 4 items there.
And is there a second?
Second.
You hear a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carries. Great. And that takes us to the 2 items on our non-consent business agenda. First item is 2019-137, City of Burnsville, 2040 Comprehensive Plan. Mr. Colvin.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is requesting approval of the City of Burnsville's comprehensive sewer plan. This item was presented, not the wastewater plan, but the other components of the city's comprehensive plan update was presented at last week's Community Development Committee, where they acted on the other elements of that plan. From today, the item is scheduled to appear on the full council's agenda a week after next on June 26th. City of Burnsville is designated as a suburban community, and as such, the Thrive expectations for residential development for new development has an expectation that the minimum density be 5 units per acre. Burnsville is located in northwest Dakota County, located in Metropolitan Council District number 15. The city anticipates, through its plan, to have approximately 1,600 new residential households and a little over 2,100 new employees by 2040. The minimum sewered residential density as reflected in the plan is 14.6 units per acre, so they easily meet that Thrive expectation of 5 units per acre. A lot of commercial apartment residential units reflected in their plan. The city has 229 existing septic systems that provide service to residential units. They're all residential in nature. And the city of Burnsville has not been assigned an I&I mitigation work plan as part of the council's I&I program. In fact, the city's wastewater system shows little response to wet weather cycles or storm events, and therefore they have not had to respond to a work plan assignment by the council. The plan does not include specific goals, policies, or strategies for reducing excess I&I, but does include a program of systematic inspection and evaluation for I&I sources. The city, as of early last month, did not have an ordinance that prohibited the discharge of sump pumps and foundation drains and roof leaders from the sanitary sewer system. But through discussions with the city regarding their update, they have committed to passing such an ordinance, and I believe that ordinance was scheduled to appear before their city council late last month or early this month. So we do expect a new ordinance. However, the ordinance does not require the disconnection of such sump pumps, but offers a program of public education and informational material that will go out to residents, and then the city plans to evaluate the effectiveness of that.
Question on that point. You mind if I give a question here? So, I make a presumption that the houses that are older, you have more I&I, because they weren't designed with the same sort of sump baskets and way to catch that and pump that out of the basement. So it ends up going down the drain in the basement. And to now come back and have an ordinance or a policy that says, hey, you got to separate this. Now that homeowner is going to incur some cost to do that. I just wonder if the St. Paul Port Authority, there's a program called the PACE program, if that program would allow for this for projects to proceed to separate the sewer from the sanitary sewer from the sump systems, or do you have any knowledge on that? Or?
I do. Oh, sorry. That's what I work very closely with the PACE program in my day job, property assessed clean energy. And PACE, the answer is no, regrettably.
Sure.
I wish it was different. And PACE is a national initiative, and different states treat it different ways. So if this was California, the answer probably would be yes. I'm kind of guessing. But in Minnesota, it's just for energy efficiency and renewable projects, and it's not for residential at this point either. So hopefully there's other forms of financing available for a type of project like that, but it's not property assessed clean energy.
All right, Mr. Chair and council members, there's a couple of things that pertains to let's call them grandparented sump pumps into existing homes. The Unified Plumbing Code actually went through a change here in the last few years, probably the last 4 years. Whereas prior to the change, it prohibited the connection of such clear water connections to the sanitary system, but it was predicated mostly on new construction, whereas with the update a couple of years ago, it actually went back and prohibited existing connections as well. So that's one of the reasons why we ask if the communities in their wastewater plan have both an ordinance that prohibits the connection of such connections, and then also are they willing to pursue the disconnection of anything that's found. In most cities in the last 2 or 3 years have actually revised their ordinance to require the disconnection. Now that doesn't include a requirement to develop a program where they inspect and look for them, but it does identify that upon discovery that they are required to connect such connection. So the other part of your question is regards to funding. Other than through state bonding in previous years, this year we didn't have a bonding bill, but in previous years there have been grants for public infrastructure improvements. So that would be the city-owned system, and then Historically, I think we've had one offering from Clean Water Legacy, which could be used for private property work, and that those funds were used primarily for the repair and or replacement of the private service lines from the house to the either the right of way or to the connection out to the main. So it didn't. That money was not available to address specific sump pump connections. So, you know, the direct answer to your question is there isn't any funding sources that I'm aware of that would be applicable for sump pump disconnections, other than local funds that might be made available.
Yeah, and I'm curious to know how much would that cost generally for
That's
a
my
homeowner,
follow-up
for you,
question.
like your average homeowner? I'm not really sure.
That's my follow-up.
That was your question? too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Council Member. The cost can vary. In most cases, the sump pump will be located, the sump pit will be located in the utility room of the house. And normally the discharge, illicit discharge will go to a laundry tub. And so they're usually located along the foundational wall. So the fix would be to redirect that discharge pipe up into the foundation wall or up to the wall of the house and then outside for discharge. Those costs can range anywhere from $150 to $300. Local communities require that those redirection of those drains be permanent, so that they can be switched out easily. In some cases, though, the redirection of sump water into a yard can cause flooding problems. And so some communities have also initiated the installation of street reconstruction projects to install a behind the curb collector as part of their storm system. So of course then the costs will be quite a bit more than the $300 per unit to disconnect it. It would also include the piping necessary to get from the house all the way out to the street. So it can vary, but generally speaking, if it's just the simple redirection from out of the sump, out of the laundry tub to outside the foundation wall, anywhere from $150 to $300.
Please.
And then what would that save the system if some sort of a program was put into place to separate the two? Do you have any estimate on what kind of benefit that could do to for the system to decrease the amount of storm water that we're processing that probably shouldn't need to be?
Right, Mr. Chair and Council Member. Depending on the conditions in which the house is being impacted by foundational drainage into the sump basket, we've calculated taking your average sump pump and the discharge rate. If you assume that it runs just 12 hours out of the day, it's equivalent to about 26 residential connections to the system. So one sump pump is equal to about the discharge of 26 to 30 homes. So again, you get 100 sump pumps. That's a pretty significant amount of flow that could be taken out of the system if you're redirecting it out of the sump basket or out of a laundry tub.
It would be interesting to think about a program like that, a financing program, and maybe a lot of people wouldn't take advantage of it if it's $150 or $300. They would just pay for it. But if it's more substantial, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 for a longer pipe, and you could have an assessment, just put it onto your property taxes. That would be really easy, I would think. I don't know if that is. I don't know if that would require a legislative change to assessment policies to allow for this type of an assessment. But I know you can use assessments for all sorts of different things. So maybe it wouldn't.
Yeah.
You would need to find there would need to be a lot of thought to put into this.
Yeah, Mr.
But
Chair.
it seems really interesting. Like you said, it could have a pretty significant impact.
Right. And I do, Mr. Chair, I also am aware that the city of St. Paul and a number of other communities will offer to assess cost for private service lateral repairs to the property owner and spread that cost over 8 years or so. So I do know that the assessment mechanism can be used for spreading out the cost burden to private property repairs.
So we don't have to go to the legislature. that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the assessment mechanism,
Yeah.
still the funding source is still an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilmember.
Thank you, Chair. Is the best practice to redirect the water to the curb versus like the front lawn or a rain garden or something like that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and
'Cause
council member.
just to finish it out, because my assumption is if it goes to the curb, it's likely to end up in the sewer system
Yeah,
or
to the,
wastewater system.
yeah, well, it goes, the behind the curb solution usually is an extension of the storm sewer system.
Storm sewer, yeah.
So it would end up in probably a holding pond or a lake or stream or something eventually. Likewise, if it's being redirected outside of the foundation wall and just discharging onto the lawn, it's either going to infiltrate or again find its way through some natural water course, overland flow and end up in the storm sewer system or a stream or pond or whatever. I forgot maybe that was
You
the
answered
your
my
question.
Yeah,
Okay.
helpful, thanks.
Yeah. So the watershed districts would be interested in that. They sometimes provide financing for rain gardens and things of that nature, holding ponds, that's their bread and butter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. That was actually one of the points that I was going to make is that we have found some communities be pretty creative in this, in recognizing that this can be a resource. And I have seen some communities actually incorporate this into green space, rain garden type systems.
Food for thought.
Okay. Yep. Now, the one item that actually resulted in this being placed on a non-consent item is that the water policy plan requires that a community's plan identify capacity and the anticipated design flows of pipes that physically connect to the regional system. And the council uses that so that it can identify potential future projects that the cities may do in and around our facilities to one, evaluate what the potential impact to our facility will be, and also to provide an opportunity to, if we know when these improvements are going to occur, then we can evaluate our system needs and maybe do some coordination of work on our end as well as the local end. So the city of Burnsville did not have that information available in their plan, but they did identify that they are in the process of finalizing a hydraulic model that will model their system hydraulic characteristics. And once that model is completed, they have committed to providing that information to the council to basically fulfill that one outstanding item that's required under the policy plan. So in conclusion, the plan conforms to the regional wastewater system plan. It's consistent with all the council's policies and system plans. It's also compatible to all the local surrounding communities and their plans. It satisfies all of the plan requirements except for that system capacity analysis that I mentioned. The regional wastewater system, with its scheduled improvements, has sufficient capacity to serve the city, and its anticipated growth is reflected in the plan. There are a couple of advisories. Once the city does pass that revised ordinance, they need to send us a copy of that to include it in their plan. They will submit the design flow and system capacities once that hydraulic modeling results is completed. And as with all plans, a copy of the city resolution that adopts their wastewater plan needs to be submitted to the council once that's adopted. So with that, today's proposed action is for Burnsville is that the Metropolitan Council adopt the advisory comments and review record and adopt the proposed recommendations of the Environment Committee as written in the business item, which includes approval of the comprehensive sewer plan portion of the city's 2040 comprehensive plan update. With that, I can answer any questions.
Any further questions? Is there a motion to adopt the advisory comments and review record and approve the proposed recommendations of the Environment Committee as written in the business item?
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you. And that takes us to item 2019-144, emergency declaration ratification for relocation of Interceptor 8352. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'm here to present business item 2019-44, emergency declaration ratification for relocation of Interceptor 8352. I want to review emergency declarations. That declared public emergency is an emergency situation in which the health, safety, or welfare of the public or the safety of the Metropolitan Council employees or facilities is compromised or potentially compromised and requires immediate action to correct. In this case, MCS staff was recently notified by Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad that they would be removing a grade separated railroad bridge located at Highway 12 and Town Line Road and replacing the bridge with a large box culvert and retaining walls for earth support. The location here of the railroad bridge work is just south of Highway 12 at the intersection of Baker Road and Medina. The MCS interceptor is located within the railroad alignment under a license agreement. The proposed railroad retaining wall locations will be constructed directly over the existing MCS interceptor pipe. And the location of the proposed BNSF work poses a significant risk to the integrity of the MCS existing force main and would eliminate any future access to that force main for maintenance or repair work. So relocation of this interceptor is necessary to ensure that there's no disruption of sewer service for the city of Maple Plain. This relocation needs to begin immediately to ensure that there's no impact or disruption to sewer service. BNSF plans to begin work in July 2019. So the work will include engineering services and temporary conveyance, tunneling of casings to receive the relocated interceptor pipe, and surface restoration. And our plan is to hire a pre-qualified contractor to perform this work. So the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council ratify the attached justification for the declaration of emergency for relocation of Interceptor 8352 at BNSF Rail Crossing with Town Line Road Trail, south of Highway 12 in Maple Plain.
Councilmember Zirin has a question.
Are there any MCUBs available that are pre-qualified to do this work?
So there will be MCUBs that could potentially be used on a subcontracted basis. This type of work requires tunneling work, so the prime would use one of our pre-selected or pre-qualified contractors to actually prime this work. But typically, surface restoration, the temporary conveyance, many elements can be performed by NCUB or a disadvantaged business. And those goals will, to the best we can, carry through the council goals through to this project.
Thank you.
Remind me what the notification is to Maple Plain, City of Medina, City of Independence.
Well, fortunately, they're all aware, Mr. Chair, of this work. And the city has a city sanitary that's also within this area that they have to relocate. There's water main work. So there has been a general, what we call a utility meet that was conducted by Burlington Northern for all the surrounding communities. And we're coordinating with the individuals who showed up to the meeting that have utilities and need work done too. So we're working with the city of Medina, or excuse me, city of Maple Plain, since it's what services their area.
Sure. Thank you. Question?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure you said this and I just missed it. So just ask for some clarification. Is the interceptor in the Burlington Northern right of way, or I'm just questioning like why, if it's a BNSF decision that's prompting the move here, why they wouldn't be responsible for paying the bill as opposed to the Met Council? But I'm guessing I missed something.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So we are, as typical with many railroads within the metropolitan area, we are in the right of way of the railroad by license, and those licenses are typically written into the railroad's favor that if they need somebody to move, they just have to give us 60 days notice and we have to be moved at that point. It's an onerous license agreement, but that's what we do in order to have our facilities. Everybody needs to cross the railroad at some point. Cities have to deal with this all the time. And this certainly allows us to convey flow from one area to another without, with the interruption of our railroad and pay the license and not have to treat wastewater within a local community without, it'd be onerous to have to try to conceive of a system in which we didn't cross railroads. We have to cross railroads.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. And with that, we're looking for a motion.
So moved. I'll move business item 2019-144.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carries. Proceed. And with that, we are adjourned.